Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of ElevateNonprofit.com, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Excellent. Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator. We are so excited today to talk about gratitude, the role gratitude plays. We've been hearing from a lot of organizations, how do we bring people back into community? And Sally has so many resources to share with us. She's been doing frontline fundraising for a really long time. So we are so excited to have you here to talk about the importance of gratitude, gathering, and what's possible when we bring people together. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's introduce everyone to Sally so everyone can get a little background.
Yep, let's do it. Sally Dadman Bixby with Philanthropy Studio brings over 30 years of nonprofit experience to her practice as a fundraising consultant, speaker, teacher, and leadership coach. She uses her rich history in the sector to elevate fundraising efforts for nonprofits of all sizes and levels of experience. Specializing in initiating and revitalizing fundraising programs, Sally has a talent for bringing boards and staff together to raise more money. Her hands-on approach transforms the landscape of organizations, leading them from learning to thriving, while simultaneously increasing engagement and funding that powerfully drives the mission forward. Sally has been the team leader of Philanthropy Studio LLC since 2012. She is also an equestrian, grandmother, yogini, gardener, and an avid traveler. Sally, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You are really encouraging our nonprofit friends to take a look at appreciation events for their donors. Talk to us about how these events are different than other events they may have that donors engage with.
So this is not a fundraising event. You're not asking for money. So that is one of the most important aspects of it.
I just heard a collective breath of fresh air.
Well, cultivation and stewardship are a super important part of your development plan, and often the areas that get neglected the most. Understandably, everybody is overworked and under-resourced, and the focus is often on how do we get more money in the door.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to do that is to get to know your donors better.
So connecting with them, bringing people in. I want to know more about this model of event, because we often kind of break down when we're talking about events, we're looking at the purpose of the event, we're looking at the goals of the event, and then we're looking at the model that kind of are the mechanisms. So talk to me a little bit about when you're hosting a gratitude event, how are you using that as an opportunity to bring people in, or like you said, to get to know them better?
Yeah, so what I have found is that one of the greatest struggles that nonprofit executives have, staff, board, is how do we get to know our donors better?
Yeah.
And, we often coach them, you need to be calling people. Try and set up coffee dates, which I think is a good idea. However, most people don't respond to those kinds of requests. A lot of people don't.
Especially now. I think there's been a culture
yes.
shift that's happened in the past 5 years.
I think that that's part of it. I think also a lot of people aren't experienced philanthropists. They don't really understand what's going on. They're shy. They don't want to meet with someone they don't really know. Are they going to ask me for money, et cetera. So when I first started encouraging my clients to host these types of events, I didn't really think about that side benefit of people showing up that you couldn't get to meet with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's an opportunity to meet donors where they are in their comfort level. Like they may be more comfortable showing up in a crowd than meeting with you one-on-one, or even coming on a tour.
Yeah.
It's just a way for you to get them in the door and introduce them to your board and get your board involved and getting to know them too. So I have found that the things that you need to keep in mind is that this is an opportunity for you to introduce them to your staff, to your board, and to showcase the important work that you're doing in the community. Sometimes there's a little hesitancy to have that kind of focus. And it's like, we need to have entertainment. We need to make sure they're having fun. And it's like, okay, that's important. But the most important part really is that you're talking about your mission.
Now, do you have a particular formula to this kind of event? Do you have a structure you recommend as far as like what the program content is? Is it, 10 people sitting around a dinner table? Is it 60 people with a champagne toast and a 2-minute program? What do you like? How do you use the time?
Well, I think that another thing that's going to get people to come is if you don't make it very long and you do it at a time that's convenient. And I also suggest not doing it during a meal time. And then that way you're not obligated to, spend a lot of money on food and drink. So I think 90 minutes works really well.
Great.
And, light food and drink. And you have, maybe 30, 40 minutes of people collecting. They check in, you get their name tag. And then you have a program planned, and I think it shouldn't be more than 20 minutes.
Okay, so short program.
Yes, and when you talk about format, definitely have tables available in places where people can sit. You need to keep in mind the different physical abilities of the people who are attending. But this type of event, really, you want to set up as a mix and mingle. So have it so there's enough room for people to move around. And then also have everything positioned so that when it's time for you to do the program, it's easy for everybody to see. And there's enough chairs for people to sit down that want to, and also that people aren't hiding in the back corner talking and interrupting the event.
So I'm hearing a format that is easy, convenient, clear, and concise, which I think those are words that we often describe around donor solicitations, around grant formulas, around direct mail campaigns, that it's easy, it's clear, it's convenient. Those are all like a formula that speaks to our culture of busy schedules, of wanting to be in community, but wanting our time to be used well. So I think the idea of doing something that is easy to participate in, doesn't require your board to make big asks, but is an introduction or connection, is a really compelling way to move the needle with donor relationships.
It is, and I'm glad you brought up the board again, because I also recommend several steps in getting the board ready, and also having them be a part of that day. And then also there's a process afterwards. So usually a couple board meetings before, if the board hasn't worked on what I call ambassador speeches, where they role play practicing with each other, talking about the organization. You supply what you want them to review. We make a lot of assumptions about our board members, and one of them is that they really understand all the work we're doing.
Right.
And the fact is, they are really busy people, and a lot of times in our board meetings, we ask them to focus on very mundane things like financial statements and bylaws and so on. So have them practice an ambassador speech so that they have that muscle memory of feeling comfortable talking about the organization. I like to do a features and benefits exercise to warm that up so that they are in touch with not only the features, which we tend to talk a lot about in our work, is like how many programs we have, how many staff, how many people we impact, but less on the benefits, which that's the inspiring stuff.
Right.
That's the why that the two of you talk a lot about.
Right.
It's not only are these students, doing better in school, but then it gives them opportunity to go to college, which then there'll be a career. They have greater self-confidence and so on. And then at the next board meeting, I'm prompting them to keep in mind that, we've got an RSVP list. There's some key folks that haven't RSVP'd, and we'd like you to reach out to them. And what's really important with board members is you give them toolkits. It's a copy and paste email. Hi, I'm on the board. Notice you haven't responded. I really hope you can make it. Here's a link you can click to come. Add a little more information about that. And then volunteers from the board, who's coming to the event, and are you willing to be an ambassador during the event? Here's 3 names, 3 people I'd like you to seek out. And when I started asking my clients to do that, I noticed how much the room changed because there weren't little clusters of people around the room and like this little quiet chatting. What happened was the energy level lifted because board members were going and making folks welcome. They weren't all hiding in their little packs. They were reaching out to people. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I've heard you've been a loyal donor for a long time. Thank you for being here. May I show you I notice you don't have a drink. May I help you get one? Things like that. And then the room just starts flowing. And then what happens is board members are suddenly becoming fundraisers without them even knowing it.
Oh, you're tricking our board into fundraising. I love it.
I'm wondering, so I want to back up one step for me as the donor that's coming.
Yes.
How are you getting me there with the knowledge that this is different? How are you engaging me to understand, hey, Kristen, come. I'm not going to ask you for anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like? Because I do think within the sector, events are tied to fundraising. So in decoupling that, how are you talking to folks to get that engagement?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking that because sometimes things are so obvious to me, but not to others. And it is a really important piece. And it's something you also need to drill into everybody else around you. So you've talked about radical hospitality.
Yes.
I think part of that is being transparent.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so in the invitation, we say, we're inviting you to an appreciation event featuring our donors and other supporters. And I have them especially if this is the first year, put in the invite copy, this is not a fundraising event.
Okay. So clear communication to the donor. Is there an implied nature of, as a donor, you're going to be recognized or you're going to be appreciated in some way?
Well, I think yes, and that's where the program comes in. And it's also where your board members come in and your staff. You're saying, thank you for being here. Sometimes I'll acknowledge somebody. Sometimes people are a little shy about that. I did that one time. I acknowledged someone. It's like he gave to this campaign. He also gave the other campaign. And the man kind of looked down and said, well, that's not why I came to this event. And I was like, okay. So you need to be careful, but certainly saying thank you is an important part of your program. And depending on what it is, because I've done these for capital campaigns, I've done these for folks that are just celebrating their annual fund donors. And so you can tailor it.
Yeah. I think often organizations, and we're trying to promote a different way, but I think often metrics around events are how organizations gauge success. How many people were there? What did we raise? Right. What did that look like? And how did that survey feedback come back? Maybe.
Right.
But I think there are some different calibrations here in terms of what success can look like, both the night of or afternoon of or morning of this event, but also sort of what that looks like after the fact. I'm wondering if you can speak to sort of the idea of success for folks around this event. So because there's a lot of people they have to get to be stakeholders in this, right? What success can look like. And maybe if you had a couple of examples of sort of practically what that looks like for organizations.
Well, if this is the first time you've ever held the event and you get 25 to 30 people to attend, I think that's a big success.
Great.
One of the things that I hear people or when I talk to my clients about this, their hesitation is they think they're going to be overrun. It's like, oh, there's going to be so many people that come, and typically there isn't, hundreds of people banging down your door.
And lucky if they were.
I know. And then if you are a larger organization, then you segment, and we could talk about that too if you want to at some point. But I think what you need to look at as far as the measurement of success is how many people showed up. Like, how many people have you never met before that came, that you've been wanting to meet this person, or they just showed up out of the blue with a donation. Now here they are, and you got a chance to talk to them. That's a huge success. The other is, carefully coach your board and your staff around asking some open-ended questions. Things like, how did you first come to our organization? And engaging them in conversation and seeing, do they have more interest? Are they asking questions that, hopefully in some ways you can't answer, because that means you need to bring them to somebody else, like an executive director, and then they get an opportunity to meet another person in the organization and to learn more. Another way to gauge success is, do they want to come on a tour? It's like you're looking for deepening the involvement.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of metrics are important.
I think it's funny to think about. We so often talk to our boards about we need to raise money, we need to raise money, we need to raise money. And yet, if you haven't ever raised money before, that's just sort of this like concept that you nod your head at in a board meeting and then leave saying, I hope they don't call on me.
But also the layers of remove that happen when you're on a board between you and donors.
Right.
That sort of contribute to that as well.
Well, and it's almost like Devil Wears Prada. You're creating like, here is your contact, like the lookbook in Devil Wears Prada, where she researches who's going to be there and knows exactly what she's going to talk to each of them about. That idea of 2 or 3 points of contact for a board become an information intake for you. The question is, how do you capture that?
Yeah.
How do you have your board report out on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in that board meeting before, you're telling them, I need you to remember, and I've had good success with this, what are things that come up in the conversation, and report back. Because they may say something like, I just learned that I'm part of an employee matching fund. Or my uncle just moved here recently, and he was involved in an organization very similar to yours. Those are the kinds of things that you want to learn. Or I'm moving. It's like, maybe that's not what you want to hear, but it's just, then you have an opportunity to reach out to them and continue the relationship or close that feedback loop.
Yeah.
Yep.
We did an episode with Susan Howlett who talked a lot about the board's role at an event, and that it's not to fundraise, but to play host. And so often I think that a feedback loop of capturing that content is also to ask your board member, what is the next step with this donor? Because oftentimes it's as simple as, I've been on a board where I've been in a social setting with a donor, and I can come back to the organization and say, we need to bring them in for a tour, or we need to make sure they're on the invite list for the next fundraising event. So I think that being able to ask the board about what's next and what they garnered, I'm immediately now thinking about how to automate like a Google survey that they fill out. But capturing that information and getting it back into your CRM is how you can really see outcomes out of a gathering like this.
True recon.
Yeah. And what I have found, and I'm thinking that your listeners are probably of all different sizes and development and whatnot, as a fundraising organization. And I've worked with people who are like, Sally, I need you to start us, or, we're a 75-year-old organization and we're trying to go to the next level. So the board is going to be in different places depending on what you've been doing with them and fundraising. And so there's a couple pieces here that are important: the expectations of your donors and who comes and what happens, and also of your board members. And what I found is, like, part of what you're doing in this event is you're boosting their confidence.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't so hard. Now, I listened to your Susan Hallett episode, which was just chock full of really great information. And, I think it was in that episode, Kristen, that you said that, like, being at parties isn't necessarily your favorite thing to do. And so this is something that you need to keep in mind with your board members.
Right.
It's like, this may be just showing up, maybe a really big ask for them. And so I think you need to meet everybody where they are and then ask them to try a little bit harder, have courage. Is something I talk a lot about with boards, is that, have courage, do this because you care about the mission, because you have a passion for the mission, stretch yourself a little bit. But at the same time, I think staff often has unrealistic expectations of what board members are capable of doing. And that's why we need to break it down into steps. So your first year, keep it really simple, and then see what they bring back to you. And then maybe next year they're going to up it a little bit. Or maybe they had such a good conversation with somebody and they said, yeah, so-and-so said that they'd really like to go on a full tour and see one of our other properties. You say to the board member, would you want to come with me? Yeah. And so we go with this donor together.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. I think, too, the other thing I want to bring in as an idea is there's the gratitude aspect. There's the, getting donors and staff and board members together in a room. But there's also that secret sauce of having everybody that believes in a mission this strongly to be in a room to be appreciated together.
Yeah.
So whether you're on staff doing some of the thankless work, feeling like you're not seen, whether you're on the board confused about what the hell you're actually doing and why you're here, or a donor who's like, I don't know, they want to say thank you and I don't know for what. There can be a magic alchemy in a gathering itself, right? In terms of, so I think for me, too, it's organizations when they put these events together, holding that bigger frame of what is the potential power of bringing people into a space together who are all invested in the same thing, whether they're volunteering, whether they're investing money, whether they're investing time. Like, what does that look like, and how do we incorporate that into the program and the action and the activity so that people leave feeling like, I'm assuming goal-wise, the idea is that people feel more connected, seen, and invested than when they walked in that door. And part of that is being together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
also think part of it is in a connection or relationship to the mission.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I want to talk about that more. We need to take a short promotional break, but when we come back, Sally, I want to ask you about how we center the mission in this style of event too. We'll be right back.
Elevate, we believe in bringing people together. Our online learning platform for fundraising events has webinars, workshops, downloadable tools, and more, designed to save you time and stress when planning your next event. We're getting nonprofit, development, and event planning professionals the tools and ideas they need to create events that inspire donors and raise more money. So join us at elevatenonprofit.com. The link is also in our show notes.
Welcome back to the Fundraising Elevator. We're here with Sally Bixby talking about the importance of gratitude, centering gratitude in thank you events.
Yep.
And before the break, we talked about the impact of mission and how mission can tie into our events. I want to know a little bit about how in a short program, especially I think you said 20-minute program, how do you center both gratitude and mission in when you have a new donor that just walked in the door and doesn't know anything about you because they're a guest of a donor, or when you have someone who hasn't been involved with the organization in a long time, how does that get factored into the program?
Yeah, so one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure they arrive happy. So, going back to the conversation about radical hospitality, make sure that it was easy for them to get there. They know how to get in the door. Yeah. They were greeted by warm, friendly people who show them where to go next. So happy is good, not harried. And then when it's time for the program, there's a certain formula of people I like to see speaking, and usually it's the board president or the executive director. Not everybody's a strong public speaker, which is why I always rehearse everybody, even if it's a gathering like this.
Yeah.
Nobody gets to wing it.
Yeah.
Everybody rehearses. I usually tell them you've got 3 to 4 minutes because they'll take 5 to 6. And so I like the executive director or the board president to kick off, and they're acknowledging the people in the room. So they're saying, I want to thank my fellow board members. They're setting up the attitude of gratitude. I want to thank the staff, and here they are, point them out. If you have other questions after our program, you're more than welcome to ask board or staff. They do so much, celebrate them. And then this is also a good time to talk about and celebrate some of the accomplishments that have just happened and where you're going. So board, donors, they buy into something bigger than just that last thing you asked them to donate to. So you need to keep reminding them that you have a vision. And you're working towards it, and you want them to continue partnering with you as you go forward. And part of that is becoming educated. If you want to learn more, we're happy to work with you on that. And then I like to have a few people who are representative of the mission speak. So I have an event coming up where there's a woman who was involved in the first capital campaign 20 years ago. Her children went through the high school where it happened. She now has grandchildren that are swimming in the pool that she helped raise the money for the second capital campaign. She uses the pool herself. So she's an example of someone who's been with this organization since the beginning and has continued to give. Her family now is on the 3rd generation of people who are using the facility.
Wow, that would be a powerful testimonial.
Yes, exactly. And she's just a little firecracker. And then I'm going to have, because I'm talking about a competitive pool, okay, that's connected to a high school. And then there's this superstar swimmer who's a senior who's going to swim for Cal next year. And she's going to speak. She's breaking records around the county. And so she's going to get up and talk, because this is something to think about when you're hosting the event. If it's on site and if it's after hours and you don't have the magic of the nonprofit happening in action, you need to recreate it for people. Because we're going to be standing next to an empty pool, which, on normal days is in operation from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., teeming with people. But at this moment, it's going to be still and quiet. And so you want to remind people of what you're doing and why the work is so important.
Well, you mentioned something that I think is actually a really powerful way to center mission, and it sort of was a passing recommendation, which was being on site, that bringing people into your organization versus like a garden party in a board member's home. The idea of people being connected to place, I think, is really powerful. I know it can be a labor lift for program teams to, shift programs and to think about how to impact or how an event would impact them. But we had an organization similar to the pool, was a playground, that they didn't shut down the playground for the event. They held the event in juxtaposition to the playground, next to the playground, but encouraged it to be an active playground so that they could see the magic in action and see the impact of the playground. So I love that idea of being on site, bringing people in, bringing people to the thing that they're supporting.
Well, you get your storytelling done for you in this immersive way that for people from a variety of learning lenses can participate and see and experience in a different way. I think also there's something, I hate to use the word exclusive, as in there's some exclusivity around that because that starts to propagate some different ideas of things. But for donors, board members, et cetera, who aren't on site, who don't come to where direct service work is happening or experiences are being had. It can be, if we talk about events being a way to gather, and that gathering has an emotional resonance beyond the glass of wine in my hand in the room I'm in, by taking people literally into the space where mission is happening, people have a different, it's just different. When you walk into a kindergarten's room and you see the size of that chair, all of a sudden I remember who we're talking about that's sitting in that chair in a very different way. If you're, you name it, but there's just some key visual and experiential factors that I can't replicate from a stage. And it doesn't actually matter to me how amazing your ED is at speaking. There is something when we're telling stories of impact and showing what that looks like, that's a whole different deal.
It's visceral.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you tapped into storytelling. We also tapped a little bit into that sense of feeling connection, community.
Yeah.
I think that is such a key element. And Sally, during the break, you were talking a little bit about the power of belonging.
Yeah.
How have you seen these events impact storytelling, impact how people talk about your organization, impact their emotional connection or their sense of belonging to the work?
Yeah.
Well, I think that the more, or what I have seen is the more connected your donor is to more people in the organization and the place, then and they have a good experience. It's like, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that all the parking spaces closest to the building are open. When your guests start coming. It's like the staff and board, if you are able, you need to park far away so that the people who we invited have an easy way to get in. So they show up, they're in a good mood, they're greeted by warm people, they're reminded of the power of the mission. I think we often assume that people know more about our organization than they actually do.
Always.
I've had people say, "Oh, we don't need to talk about that. They already know." I'm like, don't ever make assumptions. People need to hear things 7 times. I didn't make it. There's data on that. So keep talking about the work that you're doing and highlight. Please don't use the words, "we couldn't do it without you," because that's probably, collectively, yes, but we're not hero worshiping here. Okay. What we're doing is we're acknowledging a partnership. And by being one of our donors, by being a volunteer, you are partnering with us on our mission and helping us deliver it.
I love that.
So
that's great.
Those are ways, and by being acknowledgement, unless you can see, and this is what I talk about with board members, is that if you can tell somebody is uncomfortable with you talking to them, gracefully move away. Just bring them to the drink
introvert
table.
say thank you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. They're looking at their shoes, it's like, just, give them a pass. It's like a big deal that they're even there, or their extroverted partner is off talking to somebody and they've been abandoned. It's like maybe they want to sit in the corner by themselves, but it is good to just go and check it out.
Totally.
Well, you're speaking a lot to something that Paul Zach talks about, which is immersion. And immersion is the ability to measure and connect people deeper to a sense of satisfaction about belonging. And one of his first steps of immersion is staging, meaning, is it easy to park? Is it clear where I'm going? Am I welcomed? Is there
Do they know I'm coming?
When my partner abandons me, is there someone that rescues me and knows that I'm expected there and says hello? That sense of ease is just such a critical factor to participation. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just was, I'm wondering too, I'm thinking of our superhero frontline fundraisers, full plates, maybe perhaps other events on their docket. We're coming in with this great idea of this kind of thing we can do. I'm wondering if you can talk through what are actually some of the opportunities. So that whoever is selling this and running it up the flagpole, what does that conversation look like? What can they come in armed with to say, you know what, I actually think there's an opportunity for X?
Well, I always look at where is the cultivation and stewardship happening during the year, especially before a big campaign. Because we don't want our donors to think of us as the people that only show up when we want something from them.
Right.
There needs to be that re-energizing of why I gave in the first place.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, and well, this is a bigger piece, but sometimes I've encouraged my clients to drop fundraising events when they're not really making any money and replace it with
absolutely.
a gratitude event. And then they end up raising more money, later on in the year because they've had an opportunity to get to more people and talk about the mission in a more meaningful way. So I think that's what you need to do is this is like a good team exercise. And sometimes we're teams of one, right?
Yep.
And map out the year.
Yeah.
How many times during the year are we practicing cultivation and stewardship?
Yep.
And I'm just going to break down what those definitions are because we throw them around a lot.
Thank you.
How I interpret cultivation is opportunities to bring people closer to the mission.
Yeah.
Inspiration is what I think is, and rekindling that reason why they gave in the first place. And then stewardship is saying thank you and showing them what you did with their money.
Yep.
And so when you look at the year, how many times are you having meaningful stewardship and cultivation? And one of the effective things about a fundraiser or a thank you event is that it is an effective use of your time. If you had to set up 30 coffee dates.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, have you tried setting up meetings with donors? Not that I'm discouraging you from doing it.
Right.
I'm just thinking it is a time-consuming process, just getting them to commit to a time. But if it's everybody on your staff and board knows there's going to be this 90 minutes on this Sunday afternoon from 4 to 5:30, and 30 people show up, you have spent a couple hours meeting with 30 people instead of 30 plus hours meeting with all those people individually.
Well, and also from the donor side of things, I don't feel like I have a target on me. When I get asked to coffee,
right,
I'm waiting.
Right.
Either it's going to come to me in that meeting or it's going to come to me after that meeting because you've gotten information in that meeting that you're going to go feed into your magic stuff and then you're going to come back to it, right? Whatever that is, we all sort of know some of those pieces that my inclination to show up to a thank you event might be higher and may also be what's contributing to me saying yes and donating after the fact because I didn't have to go to that. I'm not bagging on one-on-one coffee meetings. I think they're super key and instrumental. But if a donor hasn't told you that that's a good channel for them or has specifically said that's not a good channel for me, this can give you a different opportunity where they get to go in and they're a part of a bigger crowd. So it doesn't feel quite so intimidating, put on, and they may actually engage more, give you more information that you're looking for, meet a bunch of different people. It's just a different way in, and it may speak to their sensibility better than that's why they're not agreeing to get a coffee date on the calendar. They're telling you this isn't how you get me.
Right. This isn't how I use
This
my
isn't
time.
how I use my time.
Well, when we come back, we want to jump on the fundraising elevator, but let's take a short break and we'll be back with Sally Bixby.
Great.
The Fundraising Elevator is recorded at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. For years, they've been our trusted partner, delivering exceptional audiovisual production and videography for nonprofits. In 2020, they transformed into a dynamic live streaming studio, producing more than 900 virtual and hybrid events. Now, we embark on an exciting journey together to bring you this podcast. Seeking the best in live events, video production, and live streaming? We proudly recommend our friends at the AV department. Link in the episode description.
We're here talking about gratitude events with Sally Bixby, and I have attended one of your gratitude events. In fact, I think I've attended multiple, but there is an organization that we've been a longtime donor of, and we got invited to a gratitude event. And the reason why we were donors to this organization is because our best friend was a staff member at this organization. So we gave because of her work. We gave to celebrate her. We gave because of our relationship to her.
Right.
But we hadn't really had big relationships otherwise with the executive director, the board. We hadn't really totally even, been connected to the development department. And we got an invite from you to attend one of your gratitude events. And in that, you must have, I am certain that you assigned someone to have a conversation with us to understand our connection and why we gave. Because from that point forward, the impact was anytime we made a donation, the first thank you we got was from our friend that was the staff member. So you clearly took the information and utilized it for good, which definitely as a donor inspired me to understand that my gift was also going to be seen by my friend who was the reason why I was giving.
Yeah.
So just a little sort of story of how the gratitude event can really impact the information you have and how that stewards donors. You were saying that you have a great example of an organization that's been doing cultivation and stewardship really well. Can you tell us a little bit about how they're leveraging a gratitude event?
Yeah, so they hosted their thank you event in March, and they, which is not long after the year-end appeal. And this one year, the focus of the appeal was buying a new van to transport folks that participate in their program to do the activities that they do. And by the way, it was the cutest appeal. It was really effective. Well, they raised enough money to buy the van. And we always hosted the event on site. So you were talking about that place-based experience, Kristen.
Yeah.
And so we would go into this workshop area. So you just got a sense, and there's all these workstations everywhere where people would do the, assembly work that was done. And so you could see, and we had people stationed that were staff people in different areas around those workstations, and we had a little passport. So what they did is they went around, and every time they met with someone that explained a different aspect of the mission and the work and and the station itself, they got a stamp, and then they would turn that in for like this little raffle.
Amazing.
And so it encouraged people to move around the room.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had the van, which had been wrapped.
Excellent.
So it had the branding all over it, and it was really beautiful right there in the warehouse. And so they got to see in real time, here's what you were able to help pay for.
Amazing.
This is what we did with your donation. So, and those were dynamic and lively events, and I'm all about mission centered. I mean, it's really fun to have entertainment and whatnot, but you need to be careful that you're not distracting people from what you want them to know about your work and why it's so important.
Yeah, exactly.
You can do so much with place-based connection, with personal relationship connection, with centering mission and storytelling. Like those are and then maybe a welcome drink. Like those are the magic sweet sauce of connecting people, investing people, helping them to feel welcome. I appreciate you sharing gratitude events with us. I think that is a powerful tool to add to our sort of base of how we're engaging with donors. Let's hop on the
jump in the
fundraising
fundraising elevator. Let's go up to the penthouse, which is where the party happens. We ask everybody to talk about a party, gathering, get together, confab that they've been a part of that really struck them, that brought, whether it was joy or impact, or what's a party you've been to and what made it memorable?
Well, because I listened to your podcast, which I think is very good, by the way.
Well, thank you.
I knew this question was coming, and I've been thinking about it for a while, and it has been so hard to choose because, like the two of you, I've been to many events, not as many as you all have, and I'm going to choose one that was a gratitude event.
Great.
And it was in San Diego, which is where my mother lives, where I grew up and where I spent a lot of time. And it was for the local PBS TV radio station. And it was at Balboa Park, which if you've ever spent
beautiful.
it
Yeah.
is fantastically beautiful. And it was in one of the rooms there in the Prada area. And it was, my mother had decided to increase her giving to a certain level that she became part of this new circle. And they do an event to acknowledge these folks. And I happened to be in town and she asked if I wanted to go. And, it was, I felt like I was gliding into it because they were so warm when I got there. And therefore, the other guests were in a really good mood and were like talking to us and warm and inviting. And then they did this really well-rehearsed, beautiful program highlighting the different aspects of local programming that they do. And having the folks that host those programs there in the room, they spoke to us. And then it was the same thing. We just sort of glided out, really warm people. Thank you so much for coming. They weren't falling all over themselves in a way that's, too much, but just warm and sincere. And so that's an event I really enjoyed.
I love that.
When the event adds to your cup versus takes away from your cup, that's how you keep saying yes. I love it. Well, let's jump back in the elevator and head down to the boiler room, which is where all the tools are. With all of your years in fundraising and consulting, what are a couple of the key tools you would offer fundraisers to have in their toolbox?
I would say it's an attitude of remaining curious.
Yep.
And I have been doing this a long time, but I still feel like sometimes I'm a beginner.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, every time, I don't write a lot of year-end appeals. I do a lot of advice around them. But every year I go and I start researching. And I save examples. And I had in my mind, like, there's this formula, how you do a year-end appeal. And then I just paid attention, like, what am I getting a gut reaction to? And the appeals that I love this year were not the formula that I typically learned or taught. And so remaining curious and continuing to be a lifelong learner, and especially for those of us who are older white fundraisers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is a lot to be learned from our BIPOC and queer friends.
Yes.
And, I'm part of an organization that you two are intimately connected to, the People's Nonprofit Accelerator. I'm on the board. And, we create community for fundraisers, and we have a lot of different opportunities for learning. And, I need to remind myself, as someone who grew up in this white dominant culture, who was raised in it, that I need to listen. I need to pay attention, that I have to dismantle and unlearn things that I learned 30 years ago as a new fundraiser that really perpetuate some of the inequities and injustices that we are trying to undo.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And if you're not curious, you're going to miss something.
I love that. Well, the People's Nonprofit Accelerator is an organization that during the pandemic moved a lot of their conversations and learning, which they do so much teaching, online, and has become a national organization.
Yep.
Sally, you do a ton of teaching with them. How do people find the People's Nonprofit Accelerator? If they're looking for some training, if they're looking to understand dismantling oppression, if they're looking to understand how to be new in the work of fundraising, what are your recommendations for how people can connect to you there?
Well, so our website is thepeoplesnonprofit.org.
Great.
And we have membership, which is very reasonable. There's affinity groups people can join.
Great.
You could be in Mexico. You could be in France. You could be in, Northeast Portland and join us virtually for these different groups. And we have these fantastic certificate programs.
Yes.
And I got involved in the Certificate in Nonprofit Fundraising program, which is a 9-month program that I have seen, because it's been in existence, I think, 11 years now.
Yeah.
Just really move the bar on folks' knowledge and fundraising. We've got a new one coming up, don't we?
We do.
That I want to make a plug for.
Well, you should.
It's the certificate in fundraising events.
Yep.
That's true. 10-week workshop that I'm going to be leading with a lot of our partners who do education through Elevate. And I am just thrilled to be able to partner because I think the People's Nonprofit Accelerator is filling a gap that's necessary in the community right now. And the program, you were one of the big thought leaders behind the initial program of the nonprofit training program, that I have seen people early in their career go through that program and then move into executive leadership positions incredibly fast. So you have done something right in the formula of the tools and the resources that you're providing. You work with a lot of organizations, big and small. You already shared that you're both in Portland and San Diego working with folks all up and down the West Coast, but I suspect you probably work with organizations outside of the West Coast. How do people find you if they want to get involved and understand resources you offer?
So you can go to my website, philstudiopdx.com. So that's philstudiopdx.com. I'm assuming you're going to put this in the notes.
Yeah, we will link to it. Absolutely.
And you're more than welcome to email me if you want an outline of a mission-centered thank you gathering. I have one that I'm happy to email to you.
Great.
So please reach out and I'll share that resource with you and you can share it with whoever you want. I believe in sharing.
Yes.
Love it.
We love that. Well,
The two of you are very generous that way too.
Well, here at the Fundraising Elevator, we believe that we all go up when we're working together.
It's true.
So we will share out those resources. Sally, thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for talking to us about gratitude events. We appreciate you and the work that you do. So thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV Department. The program is produced by April Clark and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson and Heidi Christensen. Video production by Chris Peterson, Whitney Gomes, and Nathan Bouquet. Video editing by Steve Osborne. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group, and support from Sophia Keller, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. Loving the Fundraising Elevator, but wondering how you can talk to Sam and Kristen? Well, now's your chance to do it. Book one-on-one consulting time with Swaim Strategies experts Sam, Kristen, and Mary, and get all your event questions answered. Our team has you covered on strategic planning, fundraising strategy, storytelling, data tools, and registration support. Get the tools and the help you need to make the most impact at your fundraising event. Book at elevatenonprofit.com. The link is also in our show notes.